The second type of activities are called productive activities. Productive activities are designed for the development of productive skills. Contrary to receptive skills, productive skills are writing and speaking because learners are doing these skills to produce language. They are also called active skills because they reflect active participation on the part of the participants. They are engaged in the process of producing rather receiving the information. Productive activities for language use involve essentially the same top-down and bottom-up processes as those for receptive skills. So the procedure is the same. The process does involve bottom-up and top-down processes as we have witnessed and we have discussed in the receptive activities. From productive activities angle, we see the top-down processing involving the cultural knowledge as the most important component in this model. We can see that in top-down processing, prior knowledge of content is substance of information that a writer or speaker wishes to communicate. So from writer's point of view and from speaker's point of view, it is the cultural knowledge which, since it takes into account the content and the context, that is of the most important factor for the importance. Reason is that whatever the writer or speaker wishes to communicate, it has to rely on the cultural knowledge. Knowledge of context accounts for writers and speakers' ability to select from potential linguistic options those which are appropriate to specific communicative situation, including what should or should not be written or said. Next, prior knowledge of culture includes cultural conventions for language use. So you see that culture knowledge basically determines, in this productive processing, the writer and speaker requires the ability to choose the right or appropriate type of vocabulary, the intended meaning to be conveyed in the social context, and the things which form the conventions for the language to use. Now, opposing to the receptive activities where the understanding of language knowledge was considered as the important part of the receptive processing. Writing is the most important productive activity for second language learners who want to use it in order to develop the academic skills, writing skills, and to perform certain other functions such as far as the academic competence is concerned, they require this skill to develop essays, paragraphs, reports, and for other functions it includes preparing proposals, memos, business letters, and all that. The second language learner requires the proficiency in this particular skill to develop these competencies. Controlled writing exercises are considered to provide less opportunities as opposed to the free writing skills. Now, in controlled writing environment, the learner is provided with the very limited scenario, limited instructions, and free writing is a process where learner pays no attention to the punctuation or spellings or grammar mistakes. He or she is just in a process of writing whatever comes to their mind. So that provides more opportunity for the learners to produce language. In addition to fulfilling academic and interpersonal functions, the process of writing itself is potentially important because of how it may contribute to the successful second language learning. Reason is that this process enables learner to have a knowledge about the vocabulary, the morphology, the sounds, and not only that, but also the syntactic structure of a language. So with regard to specific writing skills, the second language learner gets more information with regard to the second language itself. It is considered that the need for interaction of other domains of communicative competence with language knowledge involves the following steps for writing proficiency. So in order to develop writing proficiency, the other domains have to be considered and their interaction needs to be looked at. The first is the formulating mental concepts that are to be expressed centrally required content knowledge. So whatever needs to be expressed needs to have the content, that how it is going to be expressed. Content knowledge is important. Second is recognizing what content will be relevant for intended readers. And this can be achieved through the context knowledge. Then structuring text within socially defined conventions of expressions, which means selecting of linguistic forms, organizing patterns, the type of message that needs to be expressed and conveyed, the topic, the purpose, and the audience. So this constitutes the cultural knowledge of the writing proficiency. The second productive skill is called speaking skills. And for the development of these skills, the specific productive activities are designed. It is considered a very important area of activity for second language learners if they will be using the language for interpersonal purposes as well as to express themselves in the academic or professional speech genres. So interpersonal, that requires your conversational skills, role play, discussion, and then you have the formal speaking skills in terms of discussions and presentations, interviews, which are professional speech genre specific. The bottom-up processes for speech production involves appropriate vocabulary, features of pronunciation, grammatical patterns to convey the intended meaning. So for this particular skill, the bottom-up requires the speech production, which the learner is required to have the correct pronunciation, the correct choice of words, and how the kind of pattern they are going to use, which will convey their speech. The top-down processes simultaneously involved in speech production require content knowledge about the topic, the cultural knowledge about the topic, as well as the micro-social context, the immediate context and the immediate surrounding where that speech is being taken place. There are two terms which need to be understood with regard to the development of speaking skills. They are called speech acts and pragmatic competence. By speech acts, we mean utterances which fulfill certain functions, and they constitute most of what is said by people in the course of interpersonal communication. So speech acts are the utterances, and these utterances are there to perform certain functions. And the speech acts are visible or observed, especially in the course of interpersonal communication. Learning how to perform these acts in the second language is central to language learning, and knowing when to deploy. So how to perform and when to deploy constitute the pragmatic competence. Other aspects of speaking competence are knowledge of conversational structure, knowledge of contextualization cues, and knowledge of communication strategies. Knowledge of conversational structure is the ability or having the understanding in terms of looking at or considering the simultaneous speaking, is it appropriate or not, overlapping, politeness, polite interaction, as well as the silence period. And also the conversation structure involves rules for topic maintenance, shifts, turn taking. All these come under conversational structure. Knowledge of contextualization cues involve basically not only the understanding of the referential meaning, which is considered basically the structural aspect or looking at the surface level of meaning comprehension, but also taking into account the socio-cultural knowledge. So this process involves not only the surface meaning of interaction, but also the social cultural knowledge. Knowledge of communication strategies basically involve knowledge of how to assess and repair misunderstanding, how to use or sustain interpersonal interaction. To conclude, the productive activities focus on developing writing and speaking as productive skills. The activities contribute to the academic writing and understanding of speech acts and pragmatic competence, respectively.